Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 174 in the Gospel of John. We must have fresh exposure to have fresh disclosure. So we're following the disciples after the resurrection of Jesus, and they're going to encounter Jesus for the third time today, and they're not going to recognize him. So they're going to encounter the unrecognized Jesus. And kind of my question was he unrecognizable? And does he in some way need to be recognized over and over? Join me in John chapter 21, verse 1. After this, Jesus revealed himself to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, back up in Galilee, and revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and two others, 7 guys altogether, were all together. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" Children, interesting. They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of the fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, that's John saying to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came into the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from land, about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And although they were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So the disciples here are encountering the unrecognized Jesus. And does he in some way need to be recognized over and over again? They're only 100 yards away. Similarly, Mary Magdalene, who was even closer, didn't recognize him. She was within clinging distance. And here he says, speaks and says, "What's for breakfast?" to these 7 guys. So this is their third time of seeing him too. So it wasn't like they hadn't seen the resurrected Lord. So here's my kind of question today is, how many times has Jesus been revealed to you? How many new interactions with Jesus have you had? Now, I pray that some people are brand new to this podcast and the answer is 0. And if so, welcome. But I'm really kind of speaking to those who have had a few before. So what collections of fresh exposures do you have to remember? How many? 100? 1,000? Some of you 10,000? Why is that? Well, Jesus is big. He's multifaceted. One day we see him in his creation, another day we see him in his compassion, another day in his power, in his teaching, in his wrath, in his patience. I could go on and on and on, and probably will for an eternity. So on one hand, this is the third time, and in a sense, we're just a little bit disappointed in these guys. They've seen him before, they've heard his words, and they're like, "I got nothing, blank slate." But here we see power over the fish, and we see his care in preparing this breakfast for this group of hungry, tired fishermen / disciples. Maybe he's asking them, "What are you guys going to do with your life? Are you going to be fishers of men or fishers of fish?" So why do we need to recognize Jesus over and over again? Well, number one, the big point is we forget. So why come back tomorrow? Why listen to this podcast daily? Well, why? Because you're going to forget what we talk about today probably, or at least some of it. And how do I know that? Because your podcaster forgets sometimes, and we are human. So, quiz, what was yesterday's podcast was about? Well, it was about belief, remember? These things are written so that you may believe. And what is belief, and when is belief, and why to believe, and how to believe. And we used the picture of a 2-year-old catching a ball, grabbing hold, holding on for the first time. All right, but most often we forget, this is the part you want to write down, we forget if the revelation is not fresh, there is no revelation. I'm going to say it again. We must have a fresh exposure to have fresh disclosure. We must have fresh exposure to have fresh disclosure. All right, so the habits of holiness, which sounds, very highfalutin, all that means is let's put ourselves on the path to regularly see him, encounter him, and maybe, just maybe, remember him. So we want to put ourselves on the path of awe and fellowship and service and the word. So when God provided for the forming nation of Israel in the desert for 40 years, he gave them manna, fresh manna, bread from the sky. How much? Enough for today, but not enough for tomorrow. Tomorrow was its own day. Tomorrow was a day when the Lord would be sought with a renewed effort, tomorrow's effort. So in some way, his disclosure is related to and perhaps even proportional to our exposure, our exposing ourselves to him. So using a picture from David Mathis' book, Habits of Grace, some of the diamonds are scattered on the ground and are easy to find. And some of the diamonds must be dug for just a bit. And some of his diamonds require a lifelong effort of faithful mining for the veins of diamonds that are deep below the ground. All of them are worth it. So our charge is to put ourselves in the path to encounter him on a regular basis. Habits on the Sabbath, worship, fellowship, the Lord's table, and the word, but also habits on the non-Sabbath, worship, consideration of his word. So you must feed yourself regularly. You eat more than just on a Sunday. You probably put yourself on a path toward breakfast today, haven't you? So his disclosure is related to and perhaps proportional to our exposure. And because we forget, if the revelation is not fresh, there often is no revelation. So we must have fresh exposure to have fresh disclosure. That's what I want you to write down. So we made a plan for breakfast, and similarly, I would like us to go recognize Jesus for today. And then come back tomorrow, and we'll recognize him again for tomorrow. Thanks for listening.